it really doesn't matter what your tone is or what you say or how right you are. If you're screaming or yelling or speaking with an elevated voice to a player after they just made a mistake, it's negative, and it does not help.
I think maybe one of the reasons why so many people are tempted to coach kids up in a game, like we've been talking about, coach them up, in fundamental skills that should be done in practice, is because we don't have very many practices. We've got to have more practices. We got to have some kind of system. We got to have some kind of program where practice is a value as much as games. We want to welcome you to episode 3 of the Coaching Life podcast. I'm Chris Stewart, and I'm one of the hosts of this podcast, along with my good friend Pat Martin. And today we continue the conversation about the player development program, and we get into something really specific here. We actually start talking about something that I don't think we had planned on doing, but it became an important point to make, and in doing so, I think it's really going to be helpful to a lot of you out there who enjoy especially coaching baseball or softball. We get into some of the pragmatics of what an actual practice might look like in player development. What are some ideas that we are talking about when we say that practices can involve a lot more than you might realize? Some of the simple things that we practice can actually involve a lot more than what you might realize. And so it's episode 3 of the Coaching Life podcast, and that starts right now. Coaches, I have a question for you. What energizes you more? Coaching practice or coaching in a game? Pat, you're a coach. I'll let you answer first.
Thanks, Chris. Well, my approach has changed on this a little bit over the years.
You mean coaches can change?
Sometimes.
All right.
But not a lot. No. I've always said, though, that I'm not a very good game manager. I think heat of the moment, I'm more of a pragmatic guy. I like to think things through and try to figure out puzzles at my own pace. Yeah. And so
I'm not playing you in chess ever.
I'm not very good at chess. But I just think perspective changes. And, when you're an athlete, when you're a sports fan, obviously it's the games that matter, But as a coach, especially since coaching my sons and trying to become a good coach and trying to figure out what drills can best prepare them for games, practice has really become a passion of mine. Now it's kind of odd because I've kind of taken a back seat over the last few years with my coach's son or my son's teams, and allowed other people that I trusted, because I knew they were able to create a practice plan and to execute it very well, to run practice so that I could focus more on other things. But for me, it's definitely practice. I feel like I'm in my element during practice. I don't feel nearly as stressed during practice, and that's probably because I have a plan. And when you go into a game, you always have a plan, but those plans change constantly. Yeah. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to adjust. So, I would say for me, practices are easier. And I would say that's not true for everybody. They would say that, a lot of people would say the games are easier because it comes more natural to them. And some people just, they're not comfortable creating practice plans. They're not comfortable, sending kids out on drills and being able to teach those drills and instruct them in a way that, that makes them enjoy it. And I think, when we think about a player development program, an aspect of that program is empowering our coaches so that when they go out onto the practice field, they feel confident and they're able to, instruct drills, and they're able to send kids from one drill to the other and keep the practice energetic and keep it fun. And if we're able to give them that, there's no doubt in my mind they'd appreciate practice more.
I agree. One of the pleasures that I got to participate in as a high school coach was every year I gave a coaches training day, clinic for any of the local Sandlot League coaches here in Athens that wanted to come. In fact, I think the board actually made it mandatory that at least one coach had to attend from every team. And so whether that be the head coach or an assistant coach or whatever, that was sort of the rule. And so we'd kind of gather together in the gymnasium out the high school or the auditorium or something, and I'd put together a little program where we talked a little bit about some of the vision and values of that league, but also just basically just basic fundamentals and ways to coach. And I remember after the first year of doing that, the first year I ever did that, I remember just planning a ton of drills. I showed them a lot of drills and things. This is what you can do. This is what you can do. And then I asked, because I actually was a youth coach at that time as well. So I was giving them drills of things that we were doing in our practices. And I had one coach come up to me. I remember he asked me, he said, those drills are great. And he said, but my problem is I don't know how to implement those into my practice. I don't know when should I do it. And what I found was in the later years, in the oncoming years, the number one question that I seemed to always receive when I would ask people, what do you want me to talk about today? Because that's how I began. I started basically adjusting my approach and said, I'm going to let you determine what we talk about because you know what you need the most. And it seemed like inevitably the number one question was how to create a practice plan. How do I help me create a practice plan? Or do you have a template that you can email us and walk us through the most efficient way to run a practice? And so I think that you hit the nail on the head, where I think that one, people aren't confident about developing practice plans on their own. I should say the common person. I mean, if you're used to coaching, you're going to get better at it.
Yeah.
But when you talk about your kid signs up for a 9-year-old ball team, and they've only been playing for a couple of years, and all of a sudden the league president looks at you and says, "Hey, by the way, we need volunteer coaches. Would you like to sign up? Here's the forms for it. Go get your background check." And you never really thought about doing that before, but they're kind of encouraging you to do it, which is needed. It's necessary, like we said before. Dad coaches are needed. Mom coaches are needed. And you sign up to coach and you've not really ever done it before, you need help. You need to understand how to do this, and you need someone that can help you with it. And so if you don't have that, you're not going to be confident. And so it brings me back to my original question of today, which energizes you more, practice coaching or game coaching? I think the reason why a majority of coaches might say that practices don't energize them is because it's like 2 hours of, I'm not exactly sure what we're supposed to do. Let's put them all out there. I'll get on the mound and I'll throw batting practice while one guy hits and everybody else fields, and then we'll, by that, hopefully that'll take up the time that we need, and then we'll get out of there, and that'll be it.
Yep.
And that's sadly that is pretty much what consists of a lot of youth practices.
Yeah, and I know that exact scenario that you gave there. I don't know. I probably complained about that scenario for years. I hate these practices. I hate when a coach gets out on and not to say that I didn't, years ago I didn't do the same thing. But live batting practice where, 12 kids shag balls in the outfield and you have one hitter.
Yeah. Not
a lot going on. And, I almost to the level that I took it personal that, coaches would do that until I realized, most likely that's probably what those coaches experienced when they were playing, and that's what they know to do. So they're confident in doing that, and that's why they do it.
Yeah. Let's pause here for a second. I got an idea. We didn't talk about doing this, but let's just pause here for a second, because I'm a believer in, if I'm going to point out something negative, then I need to create a solution. And if I'm going to say, hey, you shouldn't do this. And I agree. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't send 16 kids out into the field and have one at bat, and you're facing that one player while everybody else is back to you, and they're out there picking dandelions and everything else, and you don't know what they're doing. And, fly balls are being hit, and they're just letting them drop. They're not making any effort to go get them or whatever. And the kids are running into each other. They're out there shagging. The shagging balls thing is like no, I don't like that at all. So if we're going to say don't do that, then I say let's give them something better. Let's give them a better way. Let's right now. I mean, I know we didn't necessarily talk about getting into the pragmatics of it, but let's go ahead and do that. Let's take 5 minutes and say what would be a better way.
Okay.
I have transitioned. Batting practice is necessary. You should have time where kids get a chance to hit on the field, where they get a chance to have that same batter's eye view that they're going to get in the game, and they see the pitch, resembling as close as possible what they're going to see in a game coming from you. It's not off a tee. It's not from, it's not soft toss. It's live arm. So what would be a better way to do it than just sending kids out there?
Sure.
I'll give a suggestion.
Okay.
I mean, and this is one of the ways. If I'm doing a batting practice today, if someone says, "Hey, we got an hour to help coach my team, and my kids need BP," what would you do? I would structure a batting practice in this way, and it would be a way that you'd be practicing multiple things at the same time. And you can do this if you're the only coach. So I want to say that up front too. If you're the only coach there, you can structure this to happen this way.
With nothing else, with no other, like a batting cage or anything
no
like
other,
that. We're just talking about the field
right
here.
now. If you have a turtle, a portable batting cage, and you've got another cage, and you've got a pitching machine, there are a lot of other things that you could do as well. But here's just a very simple thing that you could do. Actually, let me begin by saying this, because I'm going to include the mental approach to the game in this as well.
I was hoping you were going to
always from now on, I should say 2016 on, the mental game has been part of every practice plan that I've created. And this is how I would use it in a batting practice scenario. Get 2 throw down home plates. And you're like, well, I can't afford throw down home plates. Well, order 2 pizzas. Order 2 large pizzas. All right. Take that pizza box, outline a home plate, and paint one of those home plates red and paint another one green. Okay, so you have a red home plate and a green home plate, and then you have the regular home plate that you're going to be hitting off of on the field. Your kids are at practice, and here's how you structure them. Let's say you got 12 kids. So we got 12 kids on the team. So that means we're not going to be able to have nearly as many groups, but we can at least have 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. So let's just go with 4 groups of 3. So we have 4 groups of 3 kids. That means we're going to have one group that's going to be preparing to hit. So that we're going to need 2 groups in the field. So let's do this. We have 2 groups in the field. Group 1 is in the field. Group 2 is in the field. Group 3 is hitting live. And group 4 is base running.
So you're going to do 4 groups of 3.
4 groups of 3.
Yep.
Yeah. So 2 groups are in the field. So those 2 groups that are in the field are actually in positions. We're going to start with those 2 groups. So group 1 and group 2, they're both in the field, which means when you rotate through, group 2 is actually going to go to hit live next. But group 1 is going to stay in the field. So you'll be in the field for 2 different groups. All right. So we have 4 groups of 3 in our BP time. The fielding groups are actually going to be fielding balls live. Every ball that's hit off the bat, they're going at it 100% effort, and they're making a play. Here's the caveat. If you're in the infield, every play that you make, let's say on hitter number 1, is going to first base. So every ball that's fielded to you, you're going to first base. Catch a line drive, throw to the first baseman. That first baseman drops all those balls in a bucket, and that way you have a collection of balls over there. Let's say for hitter number 2, every ground ball that's hit, we're turning double play. Mm-hmm. Every ground ball that we hit, we're turning double play. Hitter number 3, every ground ball we hit, we're going back to first base or whatever. I mean, you just mix it up like that. So what about the outfielders? We don't want our infielders turning around backwards in batting practice. And so I want to make sure that they're always facing forward. That way they're ready for the next pitch. They're always ready to field the next ball. So in the outfield, they're going to be throwing balls to who are they going to throw them to? Well, if we have parents, I said you're the only coach there, right? So if we got to have some parents hanging around. Come on. Or grab some kids off the street, do something. But with a high school team of 20 kids, this was a lot easier. I could actually make what I called a shagger group, because those 2 groups are defensive groups. They're actually playing defense. They're not out there shagging balls. They're playing defense. You're practicing defense. But if you have a group of parents, it's like you got 1 or 2 parents, you put a bucket in their hand and you say, hey, I want you to just go and hang out behind, just walk around behind at the edge of the fence. If there's a fence, just walk around behind the outfielders, because when the outfielders field a ball, they're just going to toss it to you. They're going to toss you the ball. You're going to collect them in the buckets, and you're the shaggers.
Yep.
We don't want our kids shagging balls. We need you shagging balls. All right. They need to practice playing defense, and so that's your shaggers right there. All right. That's what they do with the balls. And so those are your fielding groups. All right. So the hitting group that's live in the cage. So you got three. You got 3 kids in every group. So you got one that's up to bat. You've got one, so that one that's up the bat, he's at the white tee. He's at the white home plate. He's on the live field. He's seeing the ball. He's getting his cuts in. And you have one kid on the green home plate, and that green home plate is your on deck. Yeah. That's your on deck plate. All right. So he's going to be ready. So let's say it's over in front of the third base dugout, and he's behind the hitter, and he's over there just getting ready. Or she, if I did this with our softball team this past year at the high school, and he's they're getting ready. They're at that green plate, and I'll talk about what they're doing here in just a second. The one who just finished hitting, or if it's if you're waiting, if you're rotating around and the green, you go from the green plate to live hitting. The other player, so after you hit live, you go to the red home plate, which is in front of the first base dugout. And the red home plate is going to symbolize something that you're working on as well. All right. So you're not necessarily working on your on deck approach, but you're working on a different thing at the red home plate. So it symbolizes something different. What do they symbolize? Let me go back to the live hitter. The live hitter is actually going to be hitting, let's say you're going to go around 3 times. So everybody's going to get, say, let's give them 3 good fair balls or 5 good fair balls. You don't have to just get 3. I'm not a believer in getting more swings. I'm a believer in getting good quality swings.
Sure. Yeah.
And
especially in this model.
Yeah. And so if you want to get a lot of swings, go find a cage somewhere and just get a lot of hacks.
Yep.
But a lot of times in BP, one of the reasons why kids get bored is because you got a kid hitting 20 balls. You're saying, hey, we need you to get 10, and then everybody's like, oh, I want to end on a good one, and then that takes another 15 minutes and all that. But you get, let's say, okay, here's, we're going to go 3 rounds of 5 fair balls. So you get 5 good fair balls. So your first round, you see the ball hit the ball, you just react where it's pitched, and let's say it's just it's your 2-0 count, 3-0 count, 3-1 count. You're hitting that dead red pitch. That's what the first round is. Everybody gets a good chance of taking some big hacks in that first round. So while the person is there hitting in that first round, the person at the red home plate is practicing a routine for how they're going to handle a bat at bat, how they're going to handle striking out, how they're going to handle a bad call by the umpire. That's
a great idea.
How they're going to handle. And what I mean by how you're going to handle it is what kind of mental routine are you going to have? And I always suggest to the kids, learn how to breathe. Take a deep breath. When something bad happens, you immediately want to react. And so instead of immediately reacting, step back, press pause for a second, look at that red plate and have it just remind you, I need to take a deep breath right here. So just take a deep breath, take a nice deep breath, blow it out, and then just do something physical. Grab a hold of your helmet, take it off, wipe off the sweat, readjust your batting gloves, do something, tap the bat on the plate, do something. And then once you've done something physical, that just kind of gets your mind focused on the next thing. Tell yourself, all right, next pitch, right here, next pitch. And then take another deep breath, but this time you're focused on something really small. So you lift up that bat, you find the finest print on that bat and you focus on it, or you find a little pebble on the plate, or you just find something small that you want to focus on, and take another deep breath, and that just zeroes your focus on that thing. And what you're getting ready to do is just focus on what's coming next, which is the next pitch. And the reason why you're able to do that in the game is because you're practicing it.
Yeah,
that's part of BP.
Yeah,
you're practicing it.
In our last episode, one of us mentioned, how do we replicate game situations? And this is one of the ways, that we do that.
That's one of the ways.
I like what you said about how to react to negative things happening to you. And sometimes, when I'm working with my kids, not just my kids but my teams, I'll get them in there. If time's going down, I know that maybe we're only going to have 5 pitches or whatever, and I'll give them a count.
Yep.
Say, this is 0-0, this is 0-2, 1-1. But the point is, sometimes I'll throw a bad pitch. Believe it or not, I won't throw a strike, and they won't swing, and I'll say, okay, that's a strike. But even it might be 2 foot off the plate.
Yes.
And they'll look at you like, what are you talking about? That can happen in a game. An umpire can make a bad call, and when that happens, you have to be prepared to take advantage of the next pitch. And if you don't practice that, how are you going to be prepared to do that? So
and in that moment, that child, so you've given that child the first the first bit of information that's going to be so important to them, and that is, don't be surprised when it happens. It happens all the time, right? Umpires make bad calls. It happens, okay? Yeah. It's going to happen in your next game. It probably happened in your last game. It's going to happen the rest of your life. So instead of being surprised about it and getting angry about it, have a system for how you're going to handle it. And that's where your red home plate comes into play. And so once you go from the red home plate, when it's time to rotate, after that player in front of you hit fair balls, you go around to the green home plate, and now you're practicing your on-deck routine. What's your on-deck routine look like? Well, it's you getting in rhythm with the pitch. You getting in rhythm with a pitcher. You're out there, you're dancing with the pitcher. You're kind of finding, when am I going to start my load? Whatever kind of movement I've got in my hands, whatever kind of movement I've got with my lower body, just whatever your thing is, whatever your approach is to get in rhythm, you're practicing that, and you're actually seeing some pitches you're taking a cut on, some pitches you're taking, you're not swinging, but you're always on every pitch that you see and that person's at bat before you, you're practicing your yes attack approach, or your yes no approach, whatever it is that you say to yourself when you're up to bat. That's just one of the things that I always recommend, is just to always prepare to swing at every pitch. It's easier to stop your swing than it is to decide to start a swing. And so having already decided to start it, then all you got to do now is stop it if it's not the pitch you want. And so you're ready. So now you go from being on deck to getting into that box. So now it's your turn to hit. The first thing I want you to do when you get in that box is that routine that you practiced over there in that red plate. Go through that routine. Just get your deep breath on a focal point, and now you're ready to go. And you see those pitches. And so the way we would run our batting practices, we'd go, sometimes we'd mix it up. We'd go first 5 pitches are dead red. The next 5 pitches, we want you to go backside, opposite field or whatever. Just we wanted to help them with bat control, understanding where to put the barrel. Where is that barrel? Where does that barrel need to be in order for me to hit the ball to the opposite field? And what kind of pitch should I be looking for to hit that way as well? Sure. If it's a pull pitch, just let it go. Don't take it unless, and then I tell them, okay, now it's strike 2. Now you just got to hit it where it's pitched, right? You have 2 strikes, something like that. So we go around, we would do 3 sets of 5, and that would kind of be our BP time.
Yeah. So it's funny. So you're calling it BP time, but actually we're talking about, 4 different groups. We have fielders, working on fielding reps. We have base runners working on.
Yeah, I haven't even gotten to them yet.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. And then, our hitters doing, actually 3 different things. Not just hitting the ball.
They are. And if you have time, if you have enough players to create another group, have a bunting station.
Sure.
Yes, I said it out loud. Have a bunting.
Believe you did.
You've got to practice bunting, because there's going to be a time when bunting is needed, right?
When
we'll talk about that later. That's a whole other episode, isn't it? But let's go to the base runners. So we got, what are the base runners doing? They're learning, they're practicing running the bases.
Sure.
They're practicing seeing the ball for themselves, making decisions for themselves. They're practicing, getting a good jump on a ball that's a line drive that is going to hit the ground. You're not holding up on a ball just because it's in the air when you're at first or second base. If you're at third base and there's less than 2 outs, you're always holding up. That's when I'm always reminding kids, listen, I don't care if you think that ball is hit over the fence. If you're at third base and there's less than 2 outs and that ball is hit in the air, go back to the bag. Right. How many times have you seen an outfielder make an awesome catch and that kid was sure that ball was going to drop?
Yeah,
I
thought he was going to drop it. Yeah.
Yep.
I've always said, well, if he'd have dropped it, you could have crawled home.
And that's the truth. But whose fault is that? That happened to me in a game one time. It was one of my least favorite memories of coaching high school baseball.
Here's a confessionable going on.
It is. It was the 2013 sectional tournament. We're in an extra innings game, and it comes down. We're down by 1 run in the bottom of I think it was the 8th or 9th inning, and got a runner on third base with 1 out, and our next hitter hits a low liner to right field that was pretty sure. I mean, it was soft enough that you knew it was going to be caught. It may not have been deep enough to tag, but still, that's the tying run. And no matter what, your instinct needs to be to go back to the bag. And that particular runner in that particular situation broke to home plate, and I'm shouting back, and he didn't get back in time. By the time he was 1 step from the bag, the player had caught the ball in right field, made the throw, and he went to tag, and I had to hold him up. The next player popped out to the catcher. We lose. We're done. Season's over. newspaper reporter asked me after the game, what happened on that right there? Why didn't that kid tag up? And I could easily have said, I don't know. Why didn't he? But my first honest thought was, I don't remember practicing that very much.
Yeah. Right.
His instinct was not to go back to the bag. It doesn't matter how many times I told him, because granted, I do. I tell kids on every pitch, in the air, see it in the air, you're coming back. See it on the ground, you're going. But that cognitive understanding is going to be thrown out the window when it comes to what is your body, what is your instinct telling you to do in this moment.
That's a great point, because I know this year with my older son Jake. We've had multiple occasions where kids have been doubled up on line drives, and they come to the dugout, and you say, you got to freeze, you can't break on that. But you're right. I mean, how many times do we practice that? Probably not that many. I mean, we do work on base running, but that scenario right there.
Yeah. And that's the question that we have to ask ourselves as coaches every time something happens in a game. Take a little notebook with you, have note cards with you during a game, and get used to writing things down. Because one of the things that you can do as a coach is to just always ask yourself, when did we practice that? Before I yell at a kid about something, before I quote unquote coach a kid up on something that he did wrong, ask yourself, how often have we worked on that in practice?
Right.
Because you cannot assume that he's just going to know, that she's just going to know what to do. Not in today's world. I mean, they're not out there playing games on their own anymore. That's why the base running part of practice is so important, because, I see so many kids in youth ball, what are they doing? They're looking at their coaches, their base coaches, to learn how to run the base, to learn, when am I supposed to run and when am I supposed to hold up? As I come around second base, I'm out here on an island. So I run to the bag, then I look over at my coach to see, is he waving me on or is he holding me up? Well, the ball was in front of you. It was out in right center field or left center field. You could have seen the ball yourself and made the decision. You're the athlete, be instinctive. And so coaches, stop telling your kids to look at you, and running the bases. Let them make those decisions on their own.
Yeah, there's a lot of instances of things like that, right?
And in practice, when you're practicing base running, that's what you're doing. You're practicing getting reads on balls that are hit, and you can't go on every single ball in batting practice. And so you pick out a few. You're like, okay, this ball is live for me, and the next ball that's hit's live for me. So you break on it, and then maybe the batter hits a couple more, and then you get to the next bag and you're like, okay, this one's live for me, and you break on it. The next kid gets in line and he does the same thing behind you. You just keep running for as often as that round of BP is taking place with that particular group. You just keep running those bases. And we always had the kids, when you get to third base, you're staying there until, so you're going to break on ground balls that are through, break on ground balls that are past the pitcher, things like that. But we want you to remain on third base until you get an opportunity to see a fly ball to the outfield, because we want every single one of you to get more than one opportunity to get your secondary lead, have a ball hit to the outfield, and instinctively come back to the bag to tag up.
That's a great point. Yeah. And even on the balls that you're not running, you could even tell yourself in your mind, this is what I need to do in that situation. And going back to coaching kids up, I think I've gotten to the point now where I almost believe that if you're delivering a point during a game, it's almost too late. You're almost better off just to wait, just to write that down, like you said, and take it to the next practice. Yeah, that's when, because middle of the game, it's not very successful to just tell kids, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. It's not going to work. You need to practice it.
Most likely what the child is thinking about is the very thing that he knows what he just did wrong.
Sure.
She's out there kicking herself already because she just made a mistake, let her teammates down, let you down, let mom and dad down, let the whole school district down. And it's not the time. It's just not the time for that. Let it go. Write it down. And then when practice comes back around, it's going to be a lot easier to deal. It's going to be a lot easier to do it in a productive way, because you're going to help that person to actually get better for the next time it takes place. And it's hard. It takes patience, and it takes a desire. It takes you as a coach having a desire, a value of practice. This practice is where the stuff happens.
Yeah. I mean, I'm smiling right now because we actually had something happen in our games this weekend, or in a game, and our catcher came off the field, and I don't even know why I'm being vague. It was my son. He he swiped a tag, and I was telling him in the situation that he's in, he needs a 2-hand tag, and it needs to be a little bit forceful. Don't let the player, because the player kind of knocked the ball out of his hand. And I said, you can't let the player dictate that. You got to take.
You
control.
had time to get 2 hands on it and get the tag down.
Sure,
drop it
and
down.
at the time, I'm telling him that, I'm thinking he should know this. This makes complete sense. But now as I'm sitting here, here's a disclaimer that we're not always perfect. I've never told him that before. We've never practiced that.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yeah. These kinds of things become so much. They're really easy to talk about. They're hard to implement. It's hard to do. But the more you become intentional about implementing them, the easier it becomes to implement as well. The reason why it's so easy to talk about is because we've experienced it. If I never failed at these things, I wouldn't know them myself. I wouldn't know to talk about them.
Yeah.
But I failed at them myself. I find myself having to always catch myself in the middle of a game, wanting to shout something to a player in the outfield who could have made a different approach. This is a ball that they laid out for, and they gave up 3 runs because it rolled to the fence. They made a great effort laying out for a ball, but now we just gave up 3 runs, where that was a situation where you should have kept the ball in front. Yes, we give up 1 run because you kept it in front and didn't catch it in the air, but 1 run's better than 3.
Yeah.
Because that player's like, man, if I catch it though, we don't give up any runs.
Sure.
Yeah, you're right, but there's a scenario, and so it's so easy to want to shout it out. You got to keep that ball in front, and they're already kicking themselves because they know they just gave up 3 runs. And so I want to catch myself in those moments and say, okay, this is one of those things I need to write down on my little notepad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. We don't even have to talk about it when she comes in from into the dugout. We can talk about it, the next practice. There's another time when that's going to be appropriate to talk about.
Yep.
So yeah.
I agree with you. I've kind of come around to that philosophy of just trying to take a bunch of notes and relaying information in practice instead of, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what your tone is or what you say or how right you are. If you're screaming at or yelling or speaking with an elevated voice to a player after they just made a mistake, it's negative, and it does not help. It really just doesn't help. So I got to a point where I was allowing my players to come off the field, and I would talk to them in the dugout. But even now, I'm wondering, they still know, and it's another one. It's something else to put in your notebook to work on in practice. So,
well, I'm going to ask a question that'll help us maybe segue to the next episode, and that is this: you can take all the notes you want in that notebook that you're carrying around with you in a game, and that notebook, the purpose of it is to make note of something that we saw in a game so that we can make sure to work on it in practice, because we haven't practiced it enough, which is why we keep failing at it in a game. I think maybe one of the reasons why so many people are tempted to coach kids up in a game, like we've been talking about, coach them up, in fundamental skills that should be done in practice, is because we don't have very many practices in which to do all this coaching.
There's all kinds of stuff that happens in baseball. What do they say about baseball? They say baseball's such a great game that if you go watch a game, you might see something that you've never seen before.
Oh, absolutely.
There's so many aspects of the game.
And you can come away from a game with a notebook full, maybe 1 page full of things, notes that you took, that you said, okay, at our next practice, we've got to work on these things. But if your team isn't practicing very much, if you've got 1 practice this week and then all of a sudden you go into another tournament next weekend, you got to get all that stuff into 1 practice.
Yep.
And in some time during there, you got to go ahead and do the things that you should do every day.
Right.
Like, PFP and some infield, outfield, some beep, some make sure everybody's getting some swings. But you also got to work on this other stuff that you just took down on notes. So when are you going to do it? We've got to have more practices. We got to have some kind of system. We got to have some kind of program where practice is a value as much as games. I don't want to say more. I'm just saying, when you say practice is a value as much as games, you're saying that you recognize that kids probably need to be practicing a ratio of 2 practices to 1 game. that when you value practice as much as you value a game, you realize that preparing them takes a little more time.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a couple of practices to equal one to get us ready for one game.
Yep.
At least 2 practices, right? Maybe 3 would be even better. But
right, 3 or 4.
we'll take what we can get. But that's what we're going to probably talk about when we come back. We'll just keep unpacking this thing, this player development. I mean, we spent a lot of time today just talking about a specific aspect of practice, and I think that in doing so, you can sort of see what my answer is to that question that I asked at the beginning, and that is, I get really energized about practice. I love practice. I love getting prepared for practice. I love writing practice plans. I love seeing how all this is going to work. I love thinking of things that we know we need to improve upon, and figuring out ways that we can work on those things in practice, and then putting it together. A lot of times before a game, people will get nervous. You have that nervous energy going, and it's a positive thing. I get that before every practice. I mean, as the day goes on, and we get closer to practice, I start to feel those butterflies. My stomach's like, okay, it's that time's coming. And because for me as a coach, that's my game day.
That's where
that's game day. That's where we shine. And my goal as a coach is to make practice so energetic in that way, to pack it with so much game-like stuff that they're going to really have to have in order to be able to play the game successfully, that when game day comes, I can relax a little bit more.
Yes.
I mean, granted, I'm still nervous on game day, but I'd like to be able to sit and watch them just like their parents want to come and sit and watch them.
And you relaying that message to your players, they can relax a little bit more. The practices are more difficult in that case than games.
The game will slow down a little bit for them, and it becomes a lot more fun.
Yes.
So it ultimately, when we say, hey, it's for the kids, we want to make sure the kids are having fun. We're believers that the better they get, the more fun they're going to have playing the game.
Definitely.
I think a lot of the reasons why a lot of your kids maybe sometimes look at you and say, I'm not having any fun anymore, is because maybe they're failing too much. And failing is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But man, let's get them failing more in practice so they can succeed more in the game.
Yes. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next episode.